welcome to another program of So Clear Media Interviews.
As to who had and helping him to not reoffend or helping him not to offend to begin with. And I have had a blessing in my life in that respect because I know I've helped save a child. And I have already seen the consequences of those guys who stood up and said, this is what I did on camera without hiding, because I've had other fellows, other molesters who have seen the picture and have called me and said, may I have a copy because it's helped me and I want to have access to this information and this testimony on a daily basis.
Absolutely. You know, one of the surprising things about the registered sex offender category today is that, and your film helped expose this, is that they have their families too. And I don't think most people know that a sex offender, let's say a registered sex offender, has a wife. Many of these men who are in their 30s, 40s have their own children. And I wonder if the public is ready to understand that these family members are themselves becoming victims of these tough sex offender laws, like you mentioned, the residency restrictions, the addresses on the web, the photos on the internet, you can't go to the parks, you know, things of that nature. But these children, these wives and children of registered sex offenders, they're punished too, aren't they? And
yes, everybody.
Tell me about
everybody is impacted. Everybody is hurt. Everybody is damaged. The irony of it all is this. I don't care, in all candor, I don't care what happens to the guys with one proviso. If what happens to the guys who perform this serves a purpose, and the purpose is that the children are better protected and it doesn't happen to children again, I'm for it. I'll tell you that straight out. But what is happening is that's not what's happening. Children are being more exposed. Children are being damaged more. We, in our attempt, and by we I say well-meaning lawmakers, we, in our attempt, our well-meaning attempt to protect children from predators in the family or out, are doing things that expose the children to a greater degree, because we are not addressing the guys who are strangers, and we are not really, because we're not doing anything to those guys. They just go to another town, another place, or another time. And the guys who are in the family are not being helped either, because no one wants to look at that, and no one wants to help them either. So everything that's happening, the residency laws, for example, do not impact on a guy who lives in the next room or a guy who lives next door. That has nothing to do with anything. So everything we're doing, well-meaning though it may be, is making matters worse because it's not filtered through the eyepiece of is this better for children. It's filtered through our cultural history of vengeance and a lack of compassion and a lack of taking care of our children. Children have no voice. No one listens to them. They have no rights. They don't vote. They have no money. So no one takes them seriously. And things that are done are not done with them and their welfare in mind. For example, I spoke to Dick Zimmer, the man who passed the Joseph Kerling law, the one from which Megan's law came and from the residency law. All that came out of that murder of that child. Mm-hmm. And I said, Dick, he's not even in the Congress anymore. I said, how did you get that law passed and why? What was the research? What was the study? Did you have any impact concept of what it would do? He said, no, we didn't have anything. There was a big hoopla in the press. There was a big movement on the part of Maureen Kanka, who organized all of that.
That's right, out of New Jersey.
Yeah, I spoke with Maureen about it too. And she's very disappointed the way it's gone. But in any case, so we said, let's pass a law. Let's get people off our backs. Let's at least look like we're doing something. And that's how the law got passed. No problem. No research. Nothing. And I said, so will you go on camera and would you talk to me about that? And he said, no. He's not even in the Congress anymore. He's, back in private practice, back in the East Coast, and he would not talk to me.
Well, you know that today's politics, like any other time, is driven by public opinion or what the public thinks that it knows about a particular topic. And today's public, unfortunately, gets most of their information, news, education, let's call it, from the soundbite news media. What's your opinion on the news media and its drive for profits and this topic that's so easily sensationalized?
Well, I think there are very few people at this point in time who see the news media as a news media. You know, if you want to look at the news media honestly, then you have to recognize that it's not news and it's not media. It's a show. It's a show like Jerry Springer's a show. It's a show like Oprah Winfrey's a show. It's a show like Johnny Carson was a show. That's what it is. It's not news. So when you get a guy like O'Reilly or that other foolish woman on Nancy Grace or Greta, whatever her name is.
Susteren, I think.
Susteren, yes, correct. When you get people like that, that's a show. That's a show just like Waldo, you know, The Simpsons.
Well, maybe that's where they invented infotainment as the substitute for news, as it was.
Well, you know, these guys make big bucks, and that's how they get their names. But what drives them is ratings. So what do they do with a subject? They pick something in the way of subject or part of the subject that they can sensationalize. It doesn't matter if it's distorted, if it's not true. It doesn't matter. They use it,
well,
and they create a buzz.
Perhaps you could say that the consumers of these news, so-called news products are also voters, and maybe that's what drives the political machine to be so tough on these former offenders.
Well, they're easy targets, and who's going to object, and who's going to not sympathize, and who's going to not want to take a guy off the streets who hurts kids? Nobody. So that is an easy fix in an appearance way. But the irony of it is it's not working. It doesn't protect kids. None of that stuff does. The whole concept of how we deal with crime anyway is archaic and medieval.
Well, give me a two-point approach to telling, or the points that you would tell a congressman or a state representative or senator, somebody in a political position, what they need to know about this topic and where they should steer legislation in the future to make all of this more sensible.
Well, there's several things that I think can help. There's no, solution in that sense. It's just an ongoing addressing of the issue and an ongoing re-education of the world. We have to get away from vengeance, and we have to get into education. We have to teach children how to be good parents, number one. Number two, we have to identify the high-risk families where incest occurs and where incest has occurred, so that those families can be in counseling, and those men in those families that have molested can be taught differently, because this is a mindset that has to be and can be changed. Maybe there is no permanent way to change it. Maybe it's a forever therapy, but that's what has to take place, and that's what we have to do, because if we just continue to put guys in prison, these guys are going to get out. And when they get out, they're worse than before they went in, because they've been dealt with more violation in prison than to copy just what they had when they were outside.
There are two things that are frequently said by politicians when garnering votes for re-election. There's two misstatements, two lies, basically, that they say about registered sex offenders. Number one is that recidivism rates, that is, the reoffense rates, are high when they're not. And the second one is, and this is really a big one, is that new sex offenses are committed by people who today are registered sex offenders. That's not true either. They're committed by people who are not registered sex offenders. Given these two large girders that support all of this, the structure called the sex offender registry and all the accessorial laws that go with that, how can we spin that down into the truth? What does the public need to do? How can we change perception to get them back on the track to reality regarding facts instead of myth?
First of all, there's some statistics that need to be stated. 95% of all sexual molestation of children occurs in the family or with close trusted friends. That's the people we read about and hear about are just a very small percentage and a very infrequent occasion by comparison. The other statistic that you need to know is that the rate of recidivism for incest molesters is very, very low, provided, and this is an interesting statistic,